Mark Micropenis Levin hates the Constitution, and I've got the receipts. Today, he watched the House of Representatives vote to end an unconstitutional and undeclared war, and his response was to call a principled, highly educated, and staunchly constitutional congressman a moron.
I'm very sorry about his micropenis.
This is what Thomas Massie posted immediately before that. He said, the Iran War Powers resolution that I co-sponsored opposing the war just passed the House of Representatives. The People's House is sending a message. And here's what Mark Levin, the self-appointed guardian of the Israel First movement, fired back. He said, the act is unconstitutional, so you demonstrated that you are a moron. By the time I'm done, you're going to understand that the only man in this exchange who doesn't understand the Constitution is the one who has sold 1 million books pretending that he wrote it. Let's start with what actually happened today. The House finally passed a war powers resolution to rein in the president's illegal war in Iran. The vote was 215 to 208, and 4 Republicans crossed their own party to make it happen. Thomas Massie, the most principled congressman in D.C., Warren Davidson, a close second on the constitutionally principled scale, Brian Fitzpatrick, who is generally an absolute turd on all things, and I long for the day when he disappears from public office, hopefully soon, if his opponent, Jamie Remy, the great Jamie Remy, who I met a couple weekends ago, has anything to say about it. And finally, Tom Barrett. I have some renewed hope tonight. Thomas Massie has been fighting this fight for years. He co-sponsored this war powers resolution. He has taken arrow after arrow from his own party, from the president, from the media, from people exactly like Mark Levin, from Miriam Adelson, and from the rest of the pro-Israel lobby for one simple position. Because he believes correctly, by the way, that Congress, not the president, gets to decide when this country goes to war. And he didn't just discover that principle this week. He's been right about it this whole time, his entire career. But I want to talk to you about a new name that's on my radar, Tom Barrett. See, Tom, he's a freshman Republican from Michigan. He's in his very first term in Congress. But his history is that he's a 22-year veteran of the United States Army and the Michigan Army National Guard. He's a helicopter pilot. He's a man who deployed to Iraq and came home having buried friends over there. And in his own words, he saw the real cost, the human cost of war, while politicians back home let it drag on for years. So look who's leading this effort from the Republican side. It's not the chicken hawks, not the neocons. It's not the talk radio hosts who never wore the uniform but somehow managed to have sweat-stained button-up polo shirts all the time. People actually trying to stop this next war are the ones who paid in blood and treasure for the last one. And that should tell you everything that you need to know about who is serious here and who is performing political theater, Mark. But now the war powers resolution needs to pass in the Senate. And the Senate is moving. 7 times already they voted to end this war in Iran, and they've come up just a little bit short each time. But the 8th time, the wall cracked. The vote was 50 to 47 in favor of ending the war and advancing the resolution out of the committee, with 4 Republicans crossing over: Rand Paul, Susan Collins, Lisa Murkowski, and Bill Cassidy. Not exactly a cast of heroes among the Republican Party, but we'll take them. Now, the House is leading, and the Senate should be able to deliver the knockout blow. One more vote, and I think it passes. This is the moment that we're in. Congress is reasserting its most basic constitutional power, and the White House response is to tell you that the vote doesn't matter. The Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, calls the War Powers Act unconstitutional. And it might be. It's never seriously been challenged in court, and the cases that were tried there were dismissed because of standing. Defense Secretary or Secretary of War, Pete Hegseth, says the president already has the authority that he needs. Vice President Vance calls the law fake. And Lindsey Graham, oh, Lindsey, his advice to the president is simple: just ignore it. Doesn't matter what they say. Got it. The people's representatives vote to end a war, and this administration and the slime balls inside of the pro-war, pro-Israel lobby say they don't have to listen. And the entire time, Mark Levin, who will never have to face the danger from an illegal war, whose children will never have to die fighting for his most favored nation of Israel, is cheering them on. And tonight, Levin doubled down. He posted that today's vote was, in his words, check it out, performative. That it doesn't matter because the president will just veto it and there's no majority in either house to override it. And bro, I thought you were a constitutional lawyer. Read your own tweet slowly, Mark. The House passed a concurrent resolution. The president does not get to veto a concurrent resolution. It never goes to his desk. And there is nothing there to veto. And your own White House admitted exactly that today in writing. You wrote 3 smug paragraphs about a veto that cannot legally happen on a thing that you don't have any idea what you're talking about. The first-year law student knows the difference between a concurrent resolution and a joint resolution. You've sold 1 million books playing a constitutional scholar on TV. And you just face-planted on the most basic mechanics of how Congress and the Constitution actually work. But here's the part that you keep running from, Mark, because it's the only part that actually matters. Veto, no veto, concurrent, joint resolution. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter because none of it changes the fact or the real important question. Did Trump have the constitutional authority to drag this country into a war with Iran in the first place? And the answer, by the most basic constitutional principles, is no. That power belongs to Congress, not to him, Mark. You can argue about how Congress takes it back. That's fair. You cannot argue that Trump ever had it in the first place. And I guess when you put another country first like you do, Mark, our own founding documents become nothing more than an inconvenience. So let's give Mark the constitutional argument that he thinks he wants. Mark Levin has built an entire career on the Constitution, the books he's written, Men in Black, Liberty and Tyranny, the Liberty Amendments. I've read them all. He calls himself a constitutionalist. He worked in the Reagan Justice Department. He never stops telling you how much he reveres the founding fathers. So good, we're going to use that. We're going to go to the founders and we're going to look at the actual text. Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution lists the powers of Congress. And right there in plain English in Article 1, that's the first one, Mark, it says that Congress shall have the power to declare war, not the president, Congress. Now, Levin will point to Article 2, which comes after Article 1, by the way, where the president is named the commander-in-chief, and he is the commander-in-chief. But being commander-in-chief means you command the military once the nation has decided to fight. It does not mean that you get to decide that the nation goes to war. There is a difference, and it's a difference that's important to talk about. And Congress, the founders, they gave that power to Congress on purpose, and I mean on purpose. They deliberated over this for a very long period of time. At the Constitutional Convention in 1787, an early draft gave Congress the power to make war. And James Madison and Elbridge Gerry, they moved to change one word from make to declare so that the president could repel a sudden attack, but could never start a war on his own. They changed the word deliberately to keep that power out of one man's hands. Now, Mark, you have to ask yourself why. Madison, he told us exactly why. And I want you to listen to this, Mark. I want you to listen closely because this is the father of the Constitution speaking. He said, the Constitution supposes what the history of all government demonstrates, that the executive is the branch of power most interested in war and most prone to it. It has accordingly, with studied care, vested the question of war in the legislature. Do you hear that, Mark? Most prone to war. Studied care. The man who wrote the Constitution is telling you, Mark, you got to listen, that the Constitution, the entire design, was built to keep the war decision away from the executive because the executive will always hunger for it. It's not Thomas Massie's opinion. That's not Dan McKnight's opinion. That was James Madison. And it's not just Madison. Let's take a look at Abraham Lincoln. Let's talk about in 1848, a young congressman, Abraham Lincoln, wrote a letter about a president who had taken the country into the Mexican War on his own authority. Here's what Lincoln said. Allow the president to invade a neighboring nation whenever he shall deem it necessary to repel an invasion, and you allow him to make war at his pleasure. And then this, the framers. Lincoln wrote about the framers that they resolved to so frame the Constitution that no one man should hold the power of bringing this oppression upon us. Hear that, Mark? War is oppression. It's one of the most tyrannical things a government can do. But they said no one man. And here is Lincoln's gut punch to the very man who had argued the other side of the argument. He said, your view destroys the whole matter and places our president where kings have always stood. Mark, I want you to listen to that. Your opinion places our president as a king. Think about that for a second. And that's my whole case. That's the whole case of the Constitution right there. So let's bring it home for little Mark, little micro Mark. Let's bring it down to the smallest possible argument to make it digestible for him. The thing that you call unconstitutional, Mark, Congress voting to reclaim its war power, is the single most constitutional thing that has happened in Washington, D.C. this week, this year, this entire administration, or at any time since 2001. And the thing that you are defending, one man taking this country to war by himself, is the exact power the framers, they stayed up at night thinking about to make sure that no president would ever hold that much power. You didn't catch Thomas Massie violating the Constitution, you prick. You sided with a king working against the Constitution, and that demonstrates that there is a moron in this argument. But Mark, that moron is you dumb fuck. And this is the part the self-styled originalist can't survive, because the moment a war that he likes is on the line, a war for the benefit of another nation, a war for the benefit of his own land, Israel, that he's so proud of and loves so much, the founders' words and their intent go straight out the window. And the Constitution is sacred to Mark Levin right up until the moment it tells him something that he doesn't want to hear. And then suddenly, the man who started a war on his own is the constitutionalist, according to Mark Levin. And the principled congressman and the freshman congressman and former National Guardsmen trying to stop him are the morons. This is the dodge that they're all hiding behind. They wave around executive power and Dick Cheney's unconstitutional unitary executive theory like it ends the conversation, but it doesn't. The executive power is about the president controlling his own branch, his own agencies, his own officials. It was never a theory that one man can take the nation to war or usurp constitutional powers from the people's representatives. They are smuggling kingly war-making in under a cover of doctrine about running a bureaucracy. But we can't let them. The president running the executive branch and the president starting wars alone are two completely different things. And only one of them is written into the Constitution. And now there's a part of this that nobody in that crowd wants to say out loud. What is this war? It's a war that we launched in February of this year alongside and on behalf of Israel against another country. A war Congress never declared, never voted to pay for or authorize. It's a war the American people, by nearly a 2-to-1 majority, said is the wrong call. 13 American service members at a minimum are already dead, including National Guardsmen from Ohio. So let's strip it all the way back down for Micro Mark. We have a president who committed American lives to a foreign war, fought alongside a foreign government and advancing that government's aims without ever once asking the American people's representatives for permission. That's not just a violation of the process. That's the precise nightmare the founders built the entire machine to prevent. George Washington warned us in his farewell address to beware the foreign influence that drags free nations into other people's quarrels. Jefferson wanted peace and commerce and honest friendship with all nations, entangling alliances with none. The war power was placed in Congress for exactly this reason, so that no single man could entangle us in somebody else's war on his own say-so or at the behest of a foreign lobby. That's not isolationism. That's the design of a republic. And Mark Levin's contribution to that design and to this republic is to call the men trying to honor it morons. Fuck that dude. I'm going to leave you with this question. If Congress can vote to end a war and the president can ignore the vote and the courts will not touch it, then who actually is left to hold the war power? The answer is the one place the federal government can't override: in your states. The soldiers that Congressman Tom Barrett served alongside, the men and women of the National Guard, they're the manpower of every one of these wars that run on. They belong to the states first, and a state can refuse to release them into unconstitutional wars, but they need us to give them the lever. And that's what Defend the Guard does. It puts the brake exactly where the federal government can't reach it. No declaration, no guard. No guard, no war. The veterans are done being quiet, and Massie clearly is done being quiet, and Congressman Barrett and Davidson and even the turd Fitzpatrick, they're done being quiet. The only question left is whether you are. Where do you stand on Defend the Guard? Go to defendtheguard.us and enlist in the movement. Add your name to the growing movement that demands that we save our republic and restore war powers where they belong, with our representatives.